But no, it's great to see you, man. I mean, it is crazy because I was listening back to the first podcast that we did together, and I had sort of forgotten we recorded that like a month and a half into the pandemic. Like it had kind of just started. And so all the stuff we were talking about, it was sort of blowing my mind because it was like, wow, we really had no idea what the next year or two was going to look like.
No. And look at us now, back in the real world.
Yeah, man. I mean, you've since then, you've put out a whole album, you toured, you're about to put out another album. I mean, you really packed a lot in there.
Things have changed, though, I think. I can't really put my finger on it, but some things have changed. I don't know what exactly, but it feels different.
Yes, I would argue quite a lot. Were you thinking of anything in particular when you said that? Did you mean personally or the world or anything?
I think I meant everything. Just I think especially personally. I think the pandemic gave a lot of time for insightful thoughts. It's 2 years, right? Was it 2 years? Almost 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you define it, but yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like a chunk of your life. And I noticed it also at shows. When I started doing shows again, I started getting people that were like, oh, this is my first concert ever. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Like, yeah, because these people couldn't go to shows in the pandemic, you know? Yeah, but also energy-wise, it just feels like the world went through a shift, and I can't really explain it in words, but I definitely feel it.
Yeah, I think it changed. I mean, obviously, you know, sort of like it changed society, but I also think it had a lot of individual effects, you know, like on each person specifically in different ways. I mean, I definitely feel like it changed me in some ways. And you're right that it was plenty of time for introspection and figuring out and refocusing the good and the bad of all of that. But yeah, I approached life a little differently in a bunch of small ways, I think.
Yes. And I'm also more grateful every day. That's what I noticed. Just like the pandemic was such a realization that you're not in control, really, even though we think we're in control.
Yeah.
But just like, I feel like I learned to kind of relax into the universe a little bit more. Just like, you know, I can try to plan everything and control everything, but in the end, you don't really control anything, you know?
Yeah.
So that was insightful, an important lesson.
Well, and I to maybe start slowly steering this to talk about, you know, the new album and current topics and all that, what you just made me think about was the idea that we have no control. It goes so deep that I think on some level, for me, I started realizing that, you know, there's this idea that like the only thing you can control is yourself and how you react to situations, and you can't control anything else. But I think I would actually say it, for me, I started to realize it goes deeper than that, where it's like, oh, sometimes I don't even control my own thoughts. You know?
You don't.
Yeah, not at all. And it's just an interesting thing to realize that like there's so many levels to accepting that and embracing that lack of control, you know? Yeah. I think about that stuff a lot. Like when you said that, like, if you think about it right now, can you control the blood flowing through your veins? You can't, you know? There's so many things that are happening in your body right now that you don't control that. It's just happening. And, you know, it gets pretty existential if you go really deep into that, you know? Because sometimes even I get thoughts and I don't know where they're coming from. It could be the most random thoughts. Of course.
And sometimes,
song. Sometimes it's like, sometimes maybe a song idea and you're like, I don't know where that came from, or a lyric, or, you know, sometimes like a really dark thought that will just pop into your head. And it's like, well, where did that come from? Why did I think about that? You know?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're completely in control of that at all. Like, and that's a scary thought, but at the same time, a very beautiful and calming thought. Like, we're not in control anyway. What am I even trying to control?
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, right. What am I trying to control is a great question because so I read the little I don't know if you call it like a manifesto that you wrote that I think by the time people hear this, other people will have read and the album will be out and that sort of thing. And I loved it, man. I got really stoked to talk to you about it. And this idea.
Was that on existentialdancemusic.com?
Where was it? I can pull it up. I think it was just something passed along by your publicist.
Yeah. I think it's on my website, existentialdancemusic.com. Yeah, I wrote a little small story about how I experienced life and music and stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think it gets into those questions of, who am I, like under all the layers, like what am I, more or less what the nature of consciousness, right?
Yes. And it's the most important question. Who am I? It's one of the most, and also one of the hardest questions and most introspective questions you can ask yourself. Yeah.
It's and somewhat unanswerable at the end of the day, right?
It is. And that changed my life when I got to that point where I realized this is kind of getting into the album already for me.
Yeah, let's go. Why not?
So I had some last year after the pandemic, we started touring again, and we're doing shows again. And at some point, I started getting like panic attacks and like anxiety attacks. I don't know why, but it was just a lot at the time. And those panic attacks, I never experienced panic attacks before. I knew anxiety was like a thing and stress could like really affect people and their bodies, but I never experienced it firsthand. Like, whoa, there was a moment I was in bed and I thought I was going to die. Like literally, I thought I was going to die.
Wow. And had you, prior to that, would you have said that you were a high stress person or an anxious person?
Well, that I never saw myself as a stressed person, but I realized my baseline of what is normal to me was already really high. You can't really compare when you go through life. You can't really compare that because you're, in the end, you're alone in your body. You have no reference to what other people are experiencing. And I started to realize, whoa, even though I say I'm not stressed, I am stressed, but I just don't, it's default for me. This is like a default state. And then I started getting into like, okay, I went to doctors. I thought, is something wrong with my heart? This and that. These anxious thoughts that come up to you, like something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And then I realized it's all just anxiety. And I was just shocked how, like, what an effect it had on my whole state of like mind and being and my body. Physical pains also, in your heart. It's crazy, which led me to this kind of inner journey, figuring out, I was like, okay, I have anxiety. And then you start to read about things and about certain teachings and lessons. And that brought me to this inner journey, which, kind of inspired the whole album, Existential Dance Music. I see that the whole album as like a therapy session with myself, figuring out who I am. Because that's the question, right? Like, you need to get to a point where you realize you are not your anxiety and you are not your fears and your doubts and your thoughts. And this is called self-inquiry. Right. I don't know if you ever heard of that, self-inquiry.
Sure, yeah.
It's where you ask yourself the question, who am I? And first you think, oh, well, I'm Son Holo, right? And then you realize that's my artist project. That's just, a name that's on the poster sometimes or on the album. Then you go like, oh, I'm Sander van Dijk, my real name, And then you realize that's also just a name someone gave me. My parents gave me that name. And then you're like, oh, well, if I'm not Sander, I can try to define myself with a story. Like I was born in Holland and then I picked up the guitar for the first time when I was 13. But still, that doesn't really define who I am right now. That's just a story.
Yeah.
And then you go to your thoughts and you think, okay, I think a lot about this stuff. I think a lot about music. But sometimes your thoughts go, they come and go, and something remains. Something remains. that you call I.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, I was like, whoa, what is that? And then when you peel down those layers, you start to realize you can't really define that in words or forms or descriptions of anything. Words are so finite when it comes to that. And you realize it's something way deeper, like a truth deep down inside that is a clear space. It's not good. It's not bad. It has no... Sorry, I feel like I'm so passionate about this stuff.
No, this is great. I was very excited to talk about this kind of stuff, man. You are very welcome to talk here.
Because when you then realize, oh, when I have anxious or scary thoughts, I used to become those thoughts. I used to become so involved and lost in those thoughts. And now I'm still practicing it. It's not something that you can just like learn in a day and then figure it all out. No, it's a practice. But now whenever I have anxious thoughts, I observe them from this clear space that I am. And that we all have and all are.
Yeah. I mean, it's the consciousness behind the eyes, right? It's the whatever that awareness is that's observing you going through your life and you feeling scared or you feeling happy, but the consciousness behind it all is the same, right?
Yes, it's the space where it all takes place in.
Yeah.
It's the clear space that allows you to feel anxious and allows you to feel happy feelings.
The one thing I read once that really stuck with me, it's a very kind of like simplistic way to think about it, but it was just a fun exercise for me. It was like the idea of if you just in your head sing happy birthday silently, just in your head, who's hearing it? Like trying to answer the question, who is hearing that,
Yeah. And then you say, yeah, me. And then you realize, okay, who is me? Who is that me?
Well, and if you're the one hearing it, then who was singing it,
Exactly. Yeah. It's beautiful. And it's so inspiring. And it taught me a lot. And I'm still learning. So the album is mostly kind of this inner journey to the light, basically,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, man, because what you're talking about in like the biggest macro sense is like searching for enlightenment, which, is sort of like that's what humans have been doing since the beginning of time. You know what I mean?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I had that realization at some point when I was writing the album, like, oh, that's what I'm kind of doing. I'm like searching for some sort of light. And of course I have that song, I Just Want to See the Light, that I wrote like 6 years ago. And back then I did not know what it meant, but I knew it was something special or something important for me. But those words came to me, I just want to see the light. And I remember, when you release a song, you have to like describe the song for like press. And I had so much trouble describing what that song meant and why I wrote it, but I did write it. And now 6 years later, I realize why. It's like I was looking for like that, like the light, like I was trying to find myself back then already.
Well, that's fascinating too. And this is sort of a romantic notion that I'm not even sure I really believe, but I really like to think about the idea that it was, sort of the you behind you, like this consciousness idea that we're talking about. It's like you were trying to send yourself a message almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's 100% true. I love that. And first I would be like, I don't believe that, but I'm the more I open myself up to believing those things, the more beauty I see and the more beautiful things are happening. So I 100% think that the subconscious you, in a way, knows so much more than your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's like the philosophical idea of like there's many wells, but it's all the same water.
Beautiful.
And so it's like, this same consciousness, like there's sort of this baseline awareness that we all have, but we all get there sort of different ways or at different depths through different methods, all that kind of thing.
And we're all shaped, and I think we're all stories. Like your story is that you were born somewhere out here in America, I suppose.
Yeah, I was born in Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Exactly. And you had parents that, raised you a certain way. You had friends that were like acted a certain way. And all of those things shaped the story around you. But it's not who you are. Who you are is beyond that story. It's like the life energy, the consciousness, the awareness that you are, where all these things take place in. Sorry, it's like
no.
It's
I know.
crazy.
I love talking about this, man. This is my favorite. By the way, this is one of my favorite things to do, is sort of like talk really grandiose about stuff that's so far beyond my depth. Like I kind of just love jumping off the end of the dock that way. So I'm happy to do that as much as you like. It does make me wonder, talking about the stories and the formative parts, because last time we did the podcast, we talked about, you as a kid, as a teenager, discovering music, playing in bands, that sort of thing. But one thing we didn't talk about, which I'm curious, sort of in this, like if we look at it as a story, like who was the kid of you in this story? Like what were you like as a kid?
Well, the funny thing is that, when you're a kid, you call yourself I, and when now 30 years later, I still call myself I, yet I've changed so much. My body's different. My thoughts are different. My emotions are different. The place where I am right now is different, yet I am still I. And that is that's the thing I'm talking about constantly. Like that's that awareness.
Of course. And I mean, some people would argue that when we're kids, like young kids, that you're actually much closer to sort of the pure
100%,
form of that
100%,
awareness.
Yeah, I believe so too. And because your question was how I was as a kid.
Yeah, just what kind of a kid were you if you think about yourself at that time? Because, if we're saying like maybe that's when we were closer to the more pure whatever awareness kind of thing.
Definitely pure. I think a lot of things are also transferred from your parents.
Yeah.
So if you've got very anxious parents, you also tend to be a lot more anxious.
I mean, we're finding out that is probably true even at a genetic level.
Yes. Or an energy. I don't know. Yeah, it's genetics. It's even energy. I talk about this with my therapist a lot. Like, if your mom, for example, is as anxious during pregnancy, that's like you can feel that already as a child. And I think I definitely had some anxious traits as a kid. I remember moving to a new school, like a new city, and I remember this very vividly. For some reason, this memory is really a big thing in my head. We had to write an essay, and I had not learned how to write capital letters yet.
Okay.
And everyone around me was writing, and I just started crying, and I cried for like an hour quietly. I cried, and there was only teardrops on my paper. And then after an hour, the teacher said, "Son, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know how to write capital letters." So I think that really sums up how I was as a kid. So perfectionistic already. So,
but then was it also not wanting to ask for help?
Yeah, I guess being a little bit shy, anxious. Yeah. I think other kids might have just like started writing without thinking, that I'm very in my head already, I think. And I realized the more and more that life is pretty awesome, the more you get out of your head and like into the real moment. And it's a process. It's a process.
It is. No, it's fascinating. You just made me think of, I listened to a lot of podcasts. I was listening to, Rick Rubin has a podcast now where he's talking to sort of people from all different disciplines. And he was talking to Whitney Cummings, the comedian. And they were sort of talking about they were talking about them as kids and being young. And this idea, I think Whitney said it, that she thinks a lot of artists feel this way, where you never really feel like you're in the world. It's more like you're just observing the world. And then at a certain point, like those observations become your creative output and that sort of thing. But that it's hard to sort of, like you're saying, to just start writing without thinking about it, like those kids, you know?
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating. I'm not sure how it works, but I definitely agree. Like I always feel like an observer, especially having moved from Holland to America, which is a whole cultural shift, super existential experience as well, because suddenly I started to realize, whoa, I thought I was this Dutch person with my Dutch behavior and my values. But now I'm here for 2 years and I'm starting to realize, whoa, what if that was just my culture, but that is not really me? You start to kind of peel down those layers. And I think that also really inspired this album. I think the album starts with this line, "I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm not who I thought I was." And that's, it's really a personal. All my music is very personal. I write from a very personal place. But this whole existential, like moving to America experience, different culture, different people, different values, it's really beautiful to experience. I'm so grateful. Like, if anything, maybe in the past I would have been like, oh, everything is so different here. I don't belong. It's not home. But now I embrace it, and it's like such a beautiful experience to see the differences between people and cultures.
Yeah, and even to realize that you have more potential to change and to be something else than maybe you thought before as well. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I also, because I always saw myself as an anxious person, you know, but that's also the story you tell yourself. So I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm sure I can at some point go beyond that and really kind of reinvent my story.
Sure. Well, and I think it sounds like you're already almost at the point of gratitude for the issues that you're facing with anxiety, that sort of thing. And I think, to me, that's something I've been working on a lot in general, is when we're presented with a negative emotion or a bad feeling, to, as much as possible, try, like as quickly as possible, try to embrace that feeling, feel thankful for having that feeling, in the sense that it's always an opportunity to learn or to evolve.
Practice, yeah.
Or to practice.
Yeah, lesson.
Yeah, to practice, exactly.
That's what I'm doing now when I feel anxious. I instead of going like, oh my God, it's coming again. I'm like, oh, let it come to me, and like, okay, this is another practice. Let's go. You know.
You know what? I'm also a pretty anxious guy, and it's interesting when I was reading what you wrote there on the existentialdancemusic.com site. Is I was relating, because I've definitely grown more anxious the older I've gotten and the further I've gotten into a music career. So I was relating to that. One thing that has been working well for me when I'm able to really do it right is when the anxiety hits, and it's a terrible feeling. It's always awful, but I almost immediately start being excited for when I will not be feeling like that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I try to look forward to, I'm like, oh man, this sucks, but like, it's going to feel so good when this passes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful for me.
Isn't that crazy how you can shift your mindset and your thoughts to focus on something more positive, and it actually works?
Yeah.
That's the power of the mind. It's so crazy, and it's not talked about enough, I think. Maybe this is TMI, but like I struggle with a lot of chronic pains that come from nowhere, like my back or my knee suddenly. And I realized that it shifts in my body. So sometimes it's my knee, and then it goes to my left side, and then it goes to my neck. And I realized that, I always used to go to physiotherapists and like doctors, and they all said, well, we can't really find anything. Or, sometimes they were like, oh, you got to train this. But I started to realize it's all stress. It's all stress that manifests itself in my body. And some people are more sensitive to that than others, I think. But for me, it's been a huge realization that instead of trying to fix my knee and doing all these things and bandages and stuff, I got to fix the mind. I got to go meditate and ground myself. And it works. And it blew my mind, because for my whole life, I believed that there was something wrong with my body. And then I started working on the mind instead of working on the knee.
Right.
And it did so much. And so I would love to inspire everybody who's struggling with like chronic pains or unexplained pain in their body to go read about the mind-body connection. There's this book also. It's called A Way Out. I think it's from, I don't know the writer, Alan something, The Way Out. But it really helped me a lot with battling like chronic pains and body pains.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, it's funny because last time we talked, I was listening to it again, and we were talking about just religion in general, and we were talking about sort of where we fall as far as like atheist, agnostic, et cetera, et cetera. And
what did I say back then?
You said more or less agnostic, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had said atheist. I'm a little further along towards the agnostic side at this point.
Were you atheist back then, and now you're like agnostic?
Yeah, I think what I said. You asked me, and I think what I said was like, I would say atheist if you asked me, but if you had a good argument, I'd listen to it. And at this point, I'm fully in the just like, we don't know what's happening. There's definitely a lot we don't understand, so.
Yeah,
I'm interested in it. The reason I brought it up is you talking about the mind-body connection and figuring out that, you sort of working on mental practices actually helped your body, all that sort of thing. It's another thing that I'm more open to these days, as far as if we start with sort of the base that we don't have any of the answers really, and there's a lot we don't understand, then for me, it's very logical to then try everything and see what works. And I think the key with any of that is not getting set in the beliefs, not saying, this is it, I found the one fact, and sort of just hardening once you find something that works. I think it's always about just like, keep exploring, keep trying it.
Yeah, base it on your experience.
Yeah.
Like if you experience that it's working for you, like what we just talked about, focusing on positive things in your mind. That sounds like such a weird thing, but it really works. It's not just me saying that, oh, just think of the positive things. No, I don't know how it works, but it works. It's true.
It's that act as if thing, man. I mean, in some ways, like, it's funny because on this podcast, a lot of times for like up and coming artists, that sort of thing, we talk about the idea of like fake it till you make it. But in some ways, that kind of works for what we're talking about too. Like if you act as if you feel a certain way, like even just there's some study I was reading, I can't remember, but it was something about basically like if you're feeling sad and you just make yourself smile, like what in that feeling, that the actual physical movements of those muscles tells your brain to, basically like start up the happy machine again.
Yeah.
And
if I experience pain and I smile, I feel a change in the pain and the way it's received. Basically, I realized my pains are just sensations interpreted the wrong way by my brain. And I'm not a scientist or anything, but I know there's so much more out there than I feel like everyone should explore everything and do whatever works for them. I think there's no set thing that works for everyone. Like it's
Have you read Ram Dass at all?
I noticed the song from John Hopkins. He has a collaboration with Ram Dass. It's beautiful. I know about Ram Dass.
Anyway, I've read a little bit of his stuff through. I sort of got turned onto it through a comedian named Pete Holmes, who is a great comedian, but then also gets really into this existential stuff. And one thing, I think this is from Ram Dass, I'm not even sure, but it basically talking about like just expanding your mind, trying everything. He was basically saying, every method is a trap if you think that it's the only way. And so the idea is kind of like if you imagine, you're sitting in front of a fire and you've got a little stick, and it's like stoke the fire with the stick, build it up, which is sort of like exploring some method or another, trying out something to see if it works for you. And then when it's enough, when you've grown the fire, throw the stick away, throw it into the fire, and then you're just left with the light and the warmth of the fire until it goes down again and you got to find another stick,
Right.
As opposed to like, like a full-on religion or something, which is sort of posed as like, no, we're the ones with the answers. You come, join our group, and then you'll have the answers. And, it's like a way to separate people.
Aren't we all in the end looking for kind of the same thing? Aren't we all just kind of looking for peace and acceptance? And
of course.
I think whatever you put it in, I think if you come from a place of love, then that's okay. If you come from a place of love, do whatever works for you to get to that light,
Yeah. And I would say, too, if you're coming from a place of love, then anything can be fixed. If you make some mistakes along the way, I don't know. I'm sure someone can give me an example of when that's not true. But in general, I think as long as you're coming from that place of love and approaching the world with love and with gratitude, that can fix a lot of the problems right off the bat.
And you can start it right now, like literally. If you're listening to this and you're starting your day, if you just think about the idea of, okay, today I'm going to approach things coming from a place of love, your interactions will be different. Your day will be different. The things you see will be different. The way you experience them will be different. I think it's really important to come from a place of love. It goes beyond words. Just try it and you'll see it. You'll see the effects.
Yeah, and again, it's funny because we're sort of talking about a thing that is more of a feeling than a like thought. But it's one of those things. I think if you practice it, eventually you just sort of understand what it feels like.
I think it's our natural state. Our love. I don't think our natural state would be hateful, and I think love is the way. And it sounds so dreamy or floaty, but it really is. The default state of the body is also healthy, right? It's not unhealthy. Like that's why I think the default state is also love.
Yeah, sure. And there's a lot of noise in the world, I think, that makes it hard to sort of connect to those things. But of course, at its core, you're right. So I wanted to ask you, to take it back to the album for a second. Last time we talked, you said one of your favorite things about writing music was the memories generated by writing the music. Like you would hear a song you wrote and you would think about where you were when you did it or who you were with, and same for touring and all of that. If you think about this new album about existential dance music, what memories are prominent around the making of it.
Yeah, I think I would like to change that, what I said, into, I think that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or did we record that?
Like 2.5,
probably?
3 years, yeah.
I feel like now, if anything, what I maybe meant to say is that I really enjoy it when I make a song and then years later someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, that song like really helped me during this time in my life." But what I like is that moment of us sharing that experience. So it's not per se the memories anymore for me. It's more the present. That's what I thought back then, how it worked, the memories.
Right.
Because I was so stuck in the future or the past, I completely disregarded the now. But now I realize music is all about bringing you into now. It's all about let's say you connect to a song of mine and we get to meet each other at a festival that I'm playing at, and you get to share a moment with me and we talk about your experience and your story. But that happens in the now, you know. The future happens in a different the future only happens in the now, you know. It's so crazy. But sorry, yeah, the memories to this album. Sorry, I'm completely butchering this whole question.
No, dude, you're not butchering anything. I love this. I mean, before you even get there, we don't even have to go into the memories if it's not the interesting part. I mean, I also wonder about, if we're talking about the moments of creation, the present moments of writing it. One thing I was thinking about coming in to talk to you is, like you said earlier, your music is all very personal. But then on this album, and you've done this in past albums as well, but you know, you're working with some really incredible people, some amazing singers, few other producers, that sort of thing. How do you navigate, you know, like something that's so personal to you, something that sort of started out of, you know, you were saying like anxiety and panic attacks and self-exploration. How does that, in the creation process, working with other people, how does it remain personal while bringing other people in, I guess is the question.
It's a great question. I think because I have a personal connection to every single person on the album. Like, for example, Bipolar Sunshine is on the album again. He's been on every album of mine, and we have such a personal connection. And it's not like we get into a session and then we write a song and we never talk to each other again. You know, we have a story. He's been in my life for, like, album 1 was 5 years ago. You know, for 5 years we have been in each other's life. Doesn't mean that we talked every day, not at all. But there's a story there. And there's this other singer called Lizzie Land, who I really connected deeply with when we were doing writing sessions. We talked a lot about anxiety, about relationships, about love. Those connections are also very personal. It's not just writing music. I feel like some of the sessions I do is like 50% talking and 50%, maybe even 60, 70% talking and 30% making music. I don't think I'd be able to make a song with someone I just could not have a conversation with. For me, it's every sound and every lyric and every word has to connect to me personally. And that's how I keep it personal. You know how the music industry works. Sometimes you get like songs sent to you and like, oh, this is a song. It's, you should put this out. It's a hit, you know? And I'm like, I don't have any connection to this. I didn't make the sounds. I didn't make the words or write the lyrics, you know? And it's just, it needs to be, it's the only way I can do it. Every sound, every little thing has to be personal. It's otherwise, you know what it is. Otherwise, when someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, that song really helped me," and thank you. If it's not personal, that whole exchange is meaningless. Because if I didn't put my heart into it, I would just not feel good with myself if it didn't come from a personal place.
Now that you've said it a couple times, that moment of someone coming up to you and talking about the song, maybe that's where the memory part comes in as well, because it's almost, that moment of someone coming up saying, hey, this song really helped me. There's, again, this is a very romantic idea, but it's a little bit of time travel where all of a sudden the moment you had, however many years ago, writing that song sort of becomes real again. Like you're back there for a second.
And connects, and two different stories connect in the moment.
Right.
And that's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful that someone could put on a song of mine, and maybe we one time get to meet at a show, and then we can have that conversation. And it's not to stroke my ego. It's not to say, oh, you love my song. No, the interaction is so special to me, because, when someone says, hey, your song really means a lot to me and it did something for me, I feel the exact same gratitude back for them, like being able to connect to it. And that's what I love to do. I love to connect. I love it when my music connects to someone. It's just, if I feel understood, I feel heard, and they feel heard and they feel understood. It's an act of love. I think it's just love,
No, of course. Yeah. Feeling understood, feeling heard, I think is a big part of probably why a lot of people who do what we do still keep doing it, right? Because that's, once you get that feeling, it's very powerful. It's very addictive, and it's
connection.
And it's fleeting, right? Like it's not a permanent feeling, which is the nature of it. Like that, there's nothing wrong with that, but because it's fleeting, at least for me, I'm like, oh, what, you want to find it again, because it's such a beautiful kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Would you agree that this is fully my feeling? That I'm not putting this on you, but sort of talking about embracing the good and the bad feelings inside of us, whether it's anxiety or happiness or creativity. You were saying a second ago, like it's not to stoke your ego, those moments. For me, there's a little bit of ego in it for me. And I think that's another thing I've been trying to embrace too, as far as I think for any artist, there's at least a little bit of like, hey, I made this cool thing and like, I'm proud of it, and it's not necessarily a negative feeling. It can be negative if you lean into it too much, or it becomes sort of the reason to do something. But for me, that's another one I've come to terms with, a little bit of sort of embracing that, of like, oh, that's cute. Like Willy has a little ego about this little song he wrote,
Yeah, I can totally see what you're saying. I think I used to think like that a lot. And I'm not bashing you for it or judging you, by the way. It's a very natural thing to feel. It drives you too,
Of course.
It drives you a little bit. But I got kind of, and I'm still kind of lost in this thought process, but I got a little bit lost in taking, like, am I able to take credit for what I do? Who gave me the talent? Who I was born, and for some reason I was really inspired to play guitar and write songs, but am I responsible for it? Like yes, of course I practiced, but I don't know who gave me that talent. Can I take credit for it? And that's a dangerous space, because then at some point you start to kind of lose yourself or your ego in that sense, which is sometimes, I guess, also useful if it drives you, like, motivates. But if I don't know where the phrase, I just want to see the light, came from, if that just came to me, how can I take credit for it? Like and this is a question. I don't know.
Of course.
I don't know the answer.
Well, let me pose a hypothetical answer to you, because I think a lot of times people talk about accessing your creativity like that, where something is sort of just beamed into your head and you don't know where it comes from. So, some people think that's sort of just being extremely in the moment, being extremely open to your creativity. I think there's an argument to be made that's maybe the most you've ever been, is when you have moments like that, where you kind of shed all of the, I'm a guy wearing a hat who has a beard, you get rid of all of that, and it's kind of the consciousness behind it,
Yeah. But then can you take credit for that? Can you say, I manifested? I don't know. It's such a, I'm really figuring this out for myself right now.
I'm trying to, I guess, just gas you up a little bit, in the sense, I think you can take credit for being maybe saying, this is a true representation of some part of like the inner core of me. You know what I mean?
Yes. But I think at the same time, that inner core is shared with everyone.
I agree.
So, and for me, that's, maybe it shows in making music, and other people might be really good at something else, talking, like therapists, or everyone has that space, and it just, I don't know. This is something this is for the next album.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. When you're a raging egomaniac.
Yeah. No, well, sometimes people come up to me, and I talked about this one time in another podcast, and then they say, "Oh, thanks for being so humble," and I just don't understand that. I don't understand what it means. Like, humble is not something that you need to put effort in. It's your natural. I think it's your natural state, being humble and kind and loving. It's like coming up to someone and saying, "Thank you for breathing."
Right.
Breathing is just what happens. It's just natural. And I don't know.
Well, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I feel the same as you. I think those people saying thank you for being humble, it's more sort of saying thank you for stepping outside of the societal structures we've built around performers and celebrity and entertainment and all of that. Because, there's sort of an established cultural trope of, how a performer acts and how a listener acts and a fan acts, and it's all constructed. It's all meaningless.
It's all constructed, yeah.
But it does exist, right? And it's pressure that we feel externally all the time.
It does exist, but it's created,
Of course.
And the more and more I get into this stuff, the more of those layers are starting to just kind of blur out, and it's all just love. And I don't know how to explain it properly, but it's, I don't see a difference between myself and someone listening to my music, because it's eventually it's all love. It's the same thing. They're experiencing the music. I'm making the music. There's no levels to it. There's not me. I mean, I'm on a stage, but it doesn't mean anything,
Yeah, no, of course. Did you ever, and if you don't want to talk about this, that's totally fine, but have you ever, or do you do psychedelics at all? Because a lot of what you're talking about, I think some people come to these ideas from that angle.
Yeah, no, I'm not really big on that. I do want to try it a couple of times. I think I did shrooms when I was really, I think it was 23 or something. That's the one time I did it, and it was beautiful. I really loved it. I saw beautiful things. The wood, I remember seeing the wood, and the wood was like dancing. It was beautiful. But after that, I haven't really, I'm not super into drugs.
Yeah. I'm the same way. That's actually, it's cool to hear you say that, because I'm very much the same as you, where I love thinking about that stuff. But I sometimes feel like a bit of an outsider even talking about these concepts, when I feel like the majority of the people who talk about it are, more into psychedelics and drugs and that sort of thing, which is cool, but it's just never been me.
I'm open to trying it for a while, though. I'm really open to seeing if that might, take me somewhere, because I do know there's really, I heard there's benefits from like taking microdosing and stuff. So I'm open to exploring that. But for now, I feel like really inspired by by being sober and accessing that space, you know. I'm not sure if sober is the right word, but just being in my natural state. Seeing what I can access from there.
Well,
but I gotta say, there's some anxiety. There's some anxiety with involving like psychedelics and stuff. There's some fears of me not letting go. So maybe it's actually good for me to kind of try and let go of that fear.
For me, the fear has always been, and I think I've said this before, but the fear, especially when I was younger, was that if I did drugs really of any kind, that it would change my brain in some kind of way I could never get back, right? And that it would just, something would change and I'd be different, and I was scared of whatever that was. And then as I got older, I'm at the point where I'm like, well, what am I trying to protect? Like, my brain's fine, but it's not like a work of art, you know? Change is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there will be a time where I feel called to. It just doesn't feel like naturally like I'm drawn to that right now. But I think I'm almost certain that there's going to be a time in my life where I feel more inclined to go that route.
And I think too, this is another thing I got from Pete Holmes, who has a really, really great book called Sex Comedy God. That sort of, it deals with a lot of like mix of art and philosophy kind of stuff. But he was talking about sort of because the West is a materialist society, that like doing drugs and consuming something is sort of an easy way for Westerners to kind of come to these ideas, but that actually there's tons of different ways to get deeper and to be spiritual and all that. And, you know, so he was sort of arguing that like, there's no right way to do it.
I learned so much from sitting still and just doing nothing. I think, you know, that's something I've always been scared of, to do that, but I plan times of the day right now to sit down and do nothing. And
do you mean meditate, or do you mean literally just sit?
I think you can call it meditate, but I think I don't think meditate is sitting, you know, in a lotus position with your arms a certain way. No, I think meditation can be a complete relaxation of everything you're doing. Like completely just embracing what is, whether you have your eyes closed or not, I think. And that's another thing. Like some people prefer certain meditations. And I think for some people it might be better to just go for a walk in the park. You know, I think there's not a set thing that works for everyone. So I think meditation, you got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Is part of it for you, like I think about the idea of sort of just sitting in stillness. And for me, part of it, I think, is getting bored and allowing yourself to be bored, which is a thing that none of us do anymore in modern society. Like, because there's always a distraction. You can always pick up your phone, that kind of thing. And for me, like, if I really just let myself get bored, it's an interesting exercise because a lot of creativity can come out of that. Like once you're done with that.
Yeah. What is bored? If you're bored, you want something else. You know, you want something in the future.
True.
So it's man, life is so fascinating, and there's so many fun things to try. even doing nothing is fun at some point. You know,
yeah, man.
You know. This is a big thing for me. I started to realize, you know, getting those panic attacks and feeling anxiety after all these years of touring and like kind of reaching goals that I thought I would never reach. But, you know, I always dreamt of being a touring artist. And then I get that, and I still feel that same anxiety I felt as a little kid, you know, with teardrops on my little paper because I didn't know how to write capital letters.
Yeah.
I still felt that same anxiety. And I was like, maybe I'm doing this the wrong way. Maybe I shouldn't look for things outside, constantly chasing after something. Maybe it's inside. And I'm still on that journey, but it's been so insightful. And if you can hear it on the album, the first song is called I Don't Know Who I Am. And the last song of the album is kind of this poem I wrote, peeling down the layers of, who I thought I was. And then I go like, I'm not my name. I'm not my face. I'm not my eyes. I'm something beyond that. But you should go listen to it. I'll send you the album.
Oh, I listened to it earlier today, actually. They sent it over.
Shit,
so
really?
it's great, man. Cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
No, I really.
And if you didn't enjoy it, it's fine too. If you didn't enjoy it, it's fine too.
I'm not lying. I liked it, man. I thought it was great. It did make me wonder, sort of, if you approached this album from a new philosophical standpoint, did anything change in the writing of it or the production of it? Like, did you feel like you were approaching your songwriting, your craft differently?
Interesting. I've always just taken the extremely personal approach. I don't know how to explain this. It's I'm very specific when it comes to songs, but this album really wrote itself in a way. It was when I feel inspired about something, I just write and things happen and I'm not in control of it, but things start to just kind of, the puzzle starts to come together. And I don't think I've changed anything. And if anything, I think it has a lot of, I think people are going to draw a line between my first album and this third album. I don't know why, but if I felt like some sort of connection to the album 1 era.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Well, maybe it's, you were talking about like a song like Light, where you sort of realized what you were trying to say to yourself much later on.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of that connection where there's, the seeds were planted back then and this is them blossoming a little.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I think there's, if you want to talk about instruments and stuff, there's a little bit less guitar on this third album. My second album, Baby You Okay, I used a lot of guitar because the plan was back then to tour with a band.
I remember that we were talking about that on the first podcast, how it all kind of got thrown out real fast.
Yep. And that was that was a great idea, but then the pandemic had different plans. So this album, I kind of, yes, there's a classical music component to it because when I'm anxious, I love listening to the classical music. I'm a huge fan of Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. Those composers, their music is just so it goes beyond words. I can't express it, but there's a lot of classical piano parts on this album. Kind of some orchestral stuff as well. Definitely, I think if you want to put it in instruments, I think this album is more piano than guitar, and more a story that kind of flows from song to song. Some songs are also kind of connected to each other. Some songs fade out into like a piano part, and then it flows into a new piano part of the new song. So it's really I hope people listen to it and kind of get embraced by this existential dance music vibe, which I hope works just as much in the club as it does in the headphones.
Right. Well, and it's a hard line to walk. I think it's one you've been sort of figuring out how to walk your whole career. I think, you do it as well as anybody does. It does make me wonder, like, as things have grown for you, and even like, you're going to go on tour pretty soon here, all that sort of thing. How do you approach a live show with something, that is very personal and intimate to you, but then at the same time, you could be up at Red Rocks or whatever in front of, thousands and thousands of people, which is like the least intimate, you can be. How do you approach that for a live show?
My approach is to still try and make it as personal as possible. I hope every person in the crowd goes away from the concert thinking, wow, I feel more vibrant right now. I feel I want the music to have almost like a healing property to it, you know? And making this new live show, Existential Dance Music, was almost like writing an extra album, because I had to re-edit everything. I had to make the drums different. I had to make edits for certain songs. I had to incorporate my older work too. So I think I kind of wrote 2 albums in a year with this new live show, because it took so much work. But I think there's a lot of parts where I'm playing guitar, singing, playing piano, actually like playing music. And I hope that connects to the people. And I think it will. I think, hey, I'm going to say it. It's all love. It's all love.
Yeah, well, and I mean, there is something to that, you know, intentions matter in art. That I think is just a fact across all disciplines. And, you know, if you approach putting together a live show with those intentions and from that place, I think in some way that comes across, or at least has a higher chance of coming across to your average concert goer, you know?
And don't get me wrong, but what I notice when I'm talking to you, trying to explain myself in words, there's this voice in my head that goes, that's like, even right now, it's like, you're not describing this the right way. It doesn't come across right. It doesn't, and music has always been the easiest way for me to make a personal connection with people and to really express what I'm feeling. So if anything, music, that's the easiest way for me to communicate what I'm truly feeling. And it's not in words, it's in sounds, and it's in energies, and it's in vibes. And all the words I'm saying right now to you, even trying to answer your question, they only point to the truth, but they're not the truth. The music is the truth, you know?
Of course. And that's, I mean, for me, one of my favorite part, like I'm a podcast fan, as well as, you know, making this podcast myself. And it's what I love, listening to other musicians, actors, comedians, artists, anything is, I think what people can take from this conversation, me talking to you, it's not so much about hearing you describe what the album sounds like or what the tour looks like. It's more about the person who's putting it together, right? And I think there's a sense of like, yeah, I feel like I know you as a person more than I did an hour ago, and that makes me want to see what this this person's creative output. Like, I think that's really the point of it at the end of the day.
And I think that's also really important. I think it's really important for especially trying to communicate it to other people. But when I try to really communicate my feelings, I'd rather play 4 guitar chords than talk for hours. It's just
yeah. Sorry about that.
No. That's why I said, don't get me wrong on this, but like,
no, I know, I'm kidding.
Communicating is such an interesting thing, and words, it's only one thing, one way of communication, and music is another way, and that's where I've dedicated my life to. And to me, it's a sacred thing, and that's why it has to be extremely personal.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good way to say it. And I would add on to that too, that it's all play at the end of the day too, right? Like us having this conversation, like to me, it's such a fun idea. We were talking about that idea of like acting as if. It's like, well, let's act like we know what we're talking about, right? Because obviously we don't, but it's very fun to act like we do, you know?
I like that approach. I like the curious, playful approach. That's great.
Yeah. And I think it applies to music too. You know, it's like, if you act like you've put out like a personal album that people can connect with, and that you've made this thought out show that really means something, just in that act, it sort of becomes true. You know what I mean?
Yes. It means a lot to me. So maybe the best way to answer that question, like how are you going to make it personal, is that it's already so personal to me. Every step of the process is personal. The music, the writing, the show creation, everything is personal. So I hope that people just feel it. I hope that they just feel it. And yeah, that's my answer.
It's a great answer. Yeah. And and feeling it could mean anything, right? It's like whatever feeling you have, that's the right feeling.
Yes. And I also would like to say that I think sometimes you can feel something deeply and know it's true, but not understand it. I think my goal is more to make people feel something real than for them to understand it. And I think that was a big realization I had for myself. Like, whoa, so many things I don't understand, but I know that they're real. You know, like let's do a little experiment. Would you be able to explain why you love a certain song? Like, why do you connect to a certain song? Is that because I like that they're playing the notes A, B, C? Or is that something way deeper than that?
Right. And it's always more complicated. I think for me, it's often tied to where I was in my life when I heard it, what else was going on in my life when the song, sometimes a song just connects with you at the right time to be very meaningful.
Yeah, but why? But why does it?
Well,
we just don't know.
Of course we don't know. Of course we don't. And I would say a lot of it is luck. Like a lot of it is random. And that's maybe, if anything, I would say that's maybe the biggest truth, is that a lot of this is random and totally uncontrolled. As much intention as we put into it, it's still random, and there's something beautiful to me about that idea too, where it's like, it's so beautiful that we work so hard on these projects and everyone in the world is putting out all this effort to do something, to make their life mean something to them. And then behind it, it's like, well, no, it's pretty much all random, guys. But the fact that we're all still trying, like there's something beautiful in that,
That's an interesting take. I think 2 years ago, I would have been off the random mindset, but I'm just not sure anymore if it's random or if it's...
Well, and I want to be clear, when I say random, I don't mean meaningless. Like it's not that nothing has any value and we should...
More like beyond our control.
More or less. Yes. More or less, yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think there is some room for some magical... I don't think coincidences are always coincidences. I think lately I'm starting to be open to the idea that there are some things and little connecting wires through life that we don't fully understand yet.
I was talking to Alan Brax. Do you know Alan Brax?
No.
He's legendary French house producer. He was in the trio Stardust, who made Music Sounds Better with You. The classic
I know that one.
90s.
I love that song.
Yeah. I mean, he's a legend. He's been making incredible French house for 30 years. And he was talking about the idea of luck. He was like, basically, it's interesting. It's like a different version of what you're saying of how do these ideas come to me? Am I responsible for any of it? For him, he was just like, no, everything good I've ever done in music is luck. He's like, it's all luck. But what I can do is I can arrange my studio and my mindset and the hours that I put in the work to try to make luck happen as frequently as possible. And it's sort of another way to think about these ideas that we're talking about, where it's like, yeah, maybe we can't control it, but maybe we can sort of engineer other elements so that door opens up a little more often,
Yes, I can see that. Yes, but then my question would be, okay, who gave him the insight that what gave him the insight that might work?
Right.
If you go even further back, damn, how did you get the personality that allowed you to come to that conclusion? It's wow. I can go really macro on this. and really, what's the opposite of macro?
Micro
At the same time. But I tend to agree that, like, having a certain flow is important, I think, to create a flow for yourself. But then, are you creating the flow yourself? I don't know. There's too many questions still. Existential dance music definitely doesn't have all the answers, but it kind of puts you on the right track.
You're almost getting into the idea of free will, and do we have free will at all?
Well, that's another. We can talk about that next year.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. No, this is fun, man. I mean, obviously, we could keep going for forever. I won't keep you here all day. Just to wrap it up, my question for you would be, if the journey you've been on the last couple of years, making this new album, having these realizations about yourself, going on this journey of self-exploration, has your why changed for sort of why you're still pushing, making music, touring, doing all these sorts of things? Because I think the last time we talked, it was sort of about that, like, you were talking about how you were a bit of a nomad and you like to sort of keep things moving and to, like, once something's done, figure out the next thing, go do that sort of thing. And now we're talking about these ideas of stillness and, internal, moving inwards, that sort of thing. So what has the motivation for making the music, for touring, for pushing and still being an active artist changed?
I think the why was always the same, but the way I interpret it has changed. I think back then I was like, all my mind could understand was, oh yeah, I love chasing after something. That's what I do. So that was my truth. That's why I did it. But now I realize I make music to be in the moment, because I realize whenever I make music, it's impossible for me to have anxiety or to have doubts, or it's like, and time, sometimes I look at the time and it's like, what? It's an hour has passed. It just felt like 5 minutes, So I think that's why also back then I was already drawn to music for that reason. I just didn't realize it. Back then I thought, I just love to be productive or do something. No, I've just been trying to get into the moment and to get closer to myself all this time. I just didn't realize it. And so the why, let's rewrite the why. It's to get closer to myself, and through that closer to the world around me, just feel connectedness with everyone and feel love with everyone. That's the reason.
Well, it's a really beautiful idea, man. And maybe this is what we can leave it on, that you were on the right path the whole time. It's just that it took you a while to figure it out,
Yeah. And it's such a, it was such a, how do you say, epiphany?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Epiphany. When I look back, my music has always been about this journey through life. We rise, we fall. I just want to see the light, searching all the world for one thing. Brighter days will come. It's always been about this journey. And it was just, wow. Looking back, I realized I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. It's just, there's no other way.
It's self-affirming. Like, you look back at the things that you made, and it's almost like it's like you were sending yourself messages for the future you. It's like a reassuring.
I didn't understand it yet, but I felt it. That's what I was just talking about. Back then, I didn't understand where I was coming from or why I wrote. I've got this song called One Thing, and it's like, why do I feel like I'm running, always chasing after something? Why do I feel like I'm running, searching all the world for one thing? And it's at the same, that single came after I Just Want to See the Light, even if it makes me blind. It's all kind of the same, basically talking about the same thing, like searching for that light inside of you and finding that peace and feeling connected to your true self, and by that to the world around you. Damn, yeah, I get goosebumps talking about this, because I realize it's beyond my understanding. It's something deeper. It's a feeling. It's a feeling you can't describe, which is also a lyric on my album.
Well, man, I'm sort of like we were talking about anticipating later feelings. I'm very stoked to talk to you in another year or two to see where you're at on this journey. Because I think you're at such an interesting point right now.
Yeah, maybe I'm like I go like full 180. I'm like nothing matters.
Right. Yeah. Dude, it's possible. Like that's kind of the beauty of it is like you could be in a totally different place and all of it is still you, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk to you in 2 years and see where we're at, where you are.
Yeah, this is
How
great, man.
Yeah, you doing okay?
We should just kind of have like an every 2 year check-in. I think that's a pretty good frequency.
Yeah, I love that. Let's do that.
Yeah, dude, I'm super, super down.
Let's set a date right now.
Okay, yeah, put it in the calendar. But no, man, it's. I was really looking forward to talking to you, man. It's always a pleasure. These are really enjoyable chats.
Likewise, I really enjoy this. Do you have any big plans for today?
No, not really. I'm gonna go. In fact, it's very small plans. I'm gonna go get some groceries. I'm gonna cook dinner. I'm excited about it, but yeah, very small plans.
Sounds huge to me. Yeah. Sounds really awesome.
What about you? What are you doing?
I am trying to, so this big tour is coming up and I notice I'm kind of overworking myself. So I promised myself to kind of work half days.
Yeah.
So after this recording session with you, I'm going to get a book and read it in the park. And that's kind of my plan for today. Kind of really actively try to not work.
Dude, that's the best. That also sounds great to me in the same way. This is, I think, part of maturing as an artist and as a person too, is like, those are now the exciting parts. Like the making music and going on tour is great. And I love it. But it's like, it's the little things that actually are the cool parts.
Well, at some point you get to a certain point where you realize you can't do the music things without the reading a book in the park things, you know. It's
you got to live an actual life to have, some inspiration to do the music.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe it's also part of getting older, like if I look at what I did 5 years ago, how much honestly, I'm not going to lie. The last time I took a proper holiday, it's like 8 years ago. So after this tour, I'm going to take a break and for a month at least try to do nothing, even though it's going to be challenging. But I need to get better at that. What's
a holiday look like for you? Or what would a holiday look like for you? Like where would you want to travel somewhere?
It's so tricky because, I once read this thing, like if you do what you love, you never have to work, but at the same time, you always work.
Yeah. Also, you can never stop working. Yeah,
exactly. That's a really interesting, because making music never feels like working to me. It feels like therapy. But of course, when you have a career in it there's expectations and goals.
And money. So, I mean, you're paying your rent with it or your mortgage,
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's interesting navigating that. But, through this whole introspective journey, this existential journey, I'm realizing I have to think of myself too and take time to breathe and take in the world and, learn to relax.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. And there's so much we can do and can experience in this world. And we're all going to be dead fairly soon, on a long enough timeline. And none of what we're doing, is going to matter in the sort of galactic sense of everything.
Yes.
So, of course, take the fucking vacation, man. Why not? Yeah.
I think that's a really, sounds really weird, but contemplating death is really interesting to me.
Yeah,
it's really, it's puts a lot of things in perspective and makes you very grateful for whatever is going on right now.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. The littlest thing you can be grateful for, and then bigger things like making music or getting to go on tour. I mean, fuck, how great is that?
I want to share this. I read this thing. It's beautiful. Death is life's biggest lesson. Death is life's biggest lesson. It's so great. It's so true. It's so true.
I mean, it's the only thing that everyone on Earth is going to do, you know?
Yeah. At the end, we all
die.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So existential. I love it.
Yeah. That's a great way to leave it, man. Yeah. My last little thought on that too is like the idea that, we're born when we're young thinking we know everything. By the time we get to the end and we die, you realize you kind of knew nothing all along, you know?
So true. Yeah.
I like thinking about that too.
Do you remember the first time you realized you existed?
Man,
that's something that messes me up personally because I think about this. When did your consciousness start?
Right.
When did it start?
Well, I think about this idea a lot. For me, I don't remember the first time, but I was always kind of I wanted attention. I wanted, like, I would always, get up on the playground and be like, Mom, look at me, like, look at what I'm doing, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there was early on for me, I was aware that getting attention from people felt good, which probably means that I was aware of being perceived and had some idea of like, how I was existing in the world along with other consciousness and that sort of thing. But I don't know. Do you have a concrete memory of it?
No, I don't. I don't recall the first time I realized I was I.
Right.
And that inspires me because it's like, what if it didn't start somewhere, was it already there? I can't.
Well, again, to take it back to the childlike, the pureness of childhood, I think the flip side of that coin or a different perspective would be that you just knew it. It started when you arrived, but you didn't have to think about it. Like it was just something you knew, that like sort of childlike certainty of just like, I'm a kid in the world and you're not thinking about it at all,
Yeah. Maybe that is the purest form, Well, oh man, I can go on about this forever, but like when we fall asleep, when we're in deep sleep and we don't have any dreams, we just sleep. We're basically, where are we? We're
right.
But we all would agree that it's peaceful.
Oh,
we all love going to sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, man, okay, I think we need to stop talking about it because we're gonna.
Yeah, man. Yeah. No, this is good. It's good to leave on a few questions, and then maybe we can, we'll come back. We'll answer the questions we just asked, and then we'll pose a bunch more in a couple of years.
Talk to you in a couple of years.
Great, man. All right, dude. I love you, man. It's great to talk to you, and have fun on tour, dude. Hopefully I'll see you somewhere out there.
Hey, I love you too. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate this conversation. And we are going to talk in a couple of years. And then we're going to share all our new insights and thoughts with each other.
Let's do it, man. I can't wait. All right, dude. Well, enjoy the park. Enjoy the book. Have a good one.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Peace out, man. Bye.